All right, it is the Rebel Room, a Las Vegas Sun podcast. I'm Ray Brewer alongside Mike Grimala. And Michael, it is the countdown to kickoff.
6 days.
6 days. 6 days until, could I exaggerate here for a second?
You go ahead.
Until the fate of the UNLV football season is known. If you go 1-0, it's like, hey,
you're off and running.
Off and running, watch out, Liberty. We're coming for that 12th playoff spot. If you're 0-1, it's a little deflating.
You kind of refocus your expectations at that point. It's more about the Mountain West title, and you're probably not going to the playoffs at that point. But, it's a big week one. I thought where you were going was, I saw you tweeted out the other day a team photo of this UNLV football team, and your caption was, "Is this the best UNLV football team ever?"
You like that tweet, baby.
I thought it was a good question.
Yes. Well, thank you. And What did you respond?
I retweeted it, and I just said, "Good question," I think. Or did I?
I don't know.
I thought I did.
I thought you had me silenced on X.
No. But I was... I think, because I was looking at the depth chart today at their weekly press conference, and I noticed that, I think 9 of the 11 offensive starters are seniors. 10 of the 11 defensive starters are seniors. This is a team that, the coaching staff has only been here for 1 year, but this is not a rebuilding, program. They're not building towards anything. This is the team. This is their peak team that they have put together. They've got, 2 All-America wide receivers. They've got, seniors everywhere, all Mountain West players. The only question mark is at quarterback, but this is the finished product of the Barry Odom rebuild. It only took 1 year, and this is the peak team. So that's a good question. They were 9-3. If they're better than they were last year, they're definitely the best team in UNLV history, I think.
Correct.
9-3, hosting the title game.
Some of those Randall, California Raisin Bowl teams.
True.
Had better records, but they were doing it against Long Beach State and Pacific, programs that don't exist anymore.
Whereas the Mountain West is usually the top-rated Group of 5 conference. That's a tough conference. If UNLV does what they did last year, and maybe instead of 9-3, if they can make that 10-2 and get to the Mountain West title game, I think you've probably got to call them the best at that point. But
yeah, if you look around the league, Reno had a surprising. They looked decent against SMU. New Mexico won in Broncos' debut. So the Mountain West is better than it was last year, theoretically. Can't get worse, I guess. And UNLV is going to be right there in the thick of things. There won't be a league game they play in where they're going to be a double-digit favorite or a double-digit underdog.
Yeah, and it's quite the contrary to what we've gotten used to with UNLV football. If they take care of business leading up to their game against Boise State, which I think is a week 8 or week 9, where they host Boise, that could be game of the century type stakes for UNLV. And it's just been so long since we've seen them play a regular season game of that magnitude. So very kind of different expectations, different stakes. This is what college football fans go through every year, where it's that's what college football has over the pros, is that every week is like a playoff. There's so much stakes with every week, and it hasn't been like that for UNLV until now. Now you're seeing what it's like. Yeah,
it's interesting. UNLV is obviously the where I went to school, if you didn't know that, and I've never. It's been an afterthought usually, hoping that you could do enough to somehow win 6 games to become bowl eligible. Different narrative, big spot against Houston, new coach there, on the road, and you just got back from the presser. So you went from Maryland Parkway.
The Monday afternoon press conference for
to
week
Green
1.
Valley Parkway here at the Las Vegas Sun Greenspun Media Group headquarters. Were you expecting Odom to go to the stage at the podium and say, "Hey, we're going to roll out with Skippy under center on day one," or are we going to keep it this 3-way battle?
I think once they got past the midway point of training camp, once they got past that 2-week mark without making an announcement on quarterbacks, we all kind of started to look at each other saying they're not going to announce this until they're not going to make an announcement, period. They're just going to the game's going to kick off, and whoever is the quarterback is going to run out there. Because at that point, it's some coaches believe in, oh, we're not going to give the opponent any help. We're going to make them prepare for all our quarterbacks. And other coaches say, like, whatever, this is our guy. We stand by him. It's better to eliminate that distraction from our team and just do that. And once it became clear at some point that Odom was in the former category, he wants to confuse the other team. He doesn't want to tip his hand. So that's how he chooses to play it.
Is he doing that to not tip his hand, or does he really not know?
He said that in the press conference. He said that, I asked him specifically, like, you're not going to make an announcement, but do the quarterbacks know at this point who's going to start and et cetera? And he said yes. Like, those guys know what the rotation's going to be. They know what the situation is.
So he's going to play more than one.
I don't know. The way he said it, he said
you just said rotation.
He used the word rotation.
Okay,
but it could be a rotation of 100 snaps for one guy and 0 snaps for the other guy. That is technically a rotation. It doesn't mean everyone's going to play. I do expect more than one quarterback to play, but I think there's going to be a starter, and then whoever the backup is may get a drive in per half or something like that. I don't think it's going to be a complete split. But
is it because you? So usually when you do we can't figure out who our guy is, it's because you don't have a great guy.
Yeah.
Is that the scenario? Or these two great guys you can't break the tie with?
I think that for most of camp and for most of the offseason, there was no great distinguishing factor between the top two quarterbacks. So Cameron Friel Odom always said he was in the competition, but he was not really competing for the starting spot. At the end of training camp, he was running the scout team. So it's clear he's not in the race. So it's between Malik Williams and Matthew Sluka. And there was, days when Sluka was much better. There were days when Malik Williams was better. Sluka's got the bigger upside. Williams will probably have a better completion percentage. But by the end of camp, the last day of camp, like Sluka was taking the first team reps, and Malik Williams was taking the sort of the backup reps. So I think that says something, because Odom even said, like, Wednesday was, though camp really ran through Friday of last week, he said Wednesday was sort of we treated that as the last day of camp, and then Thursday and Friday were game prep practices for Houston. We got to jump on it. So if you go out there and on those game prep practices, Sluka's getting most of the first team reps. I assume he's going to start and play the majority of snaps. You may see Malik Williams a little bit, but I think that's what they're going to go with, and apparently the quarterbacks know at this point. And what's interesting is I then asked Jacob DeJesus, the receiver, later on. So, like I said, Odom said the quarterbacks know. Do the receivers know? And he said they don't. He said the receivers they don't have any word who the quarterback's going to be. So apparently Odom's keeping it just among the coaching staff and the quarterbacks, and no one else knows.
So we always thought it would be Sluka as the quarterback, but
yeah,
he was a transfer in, and he couldn't do spring ball. And without those reps, and if he was here during the spring, we might not have talked the last 5 minutes on Odom's rotation.
I think that's true.
Okay, we'll see. I finally make sense.
No, yeah, you're right. I think that was probably his biggest hindrance, was just that Malik Williams had more experience running it. He looked like he had more experience running the offense. And at that, it's a tough call for the coaches, because if they believe in Sluka enough, once he arrives for training camp, they could just give him all the snaps and say, like, this is how we'll catch you up, is just by giving you the majority of the snaps. But they kind of hedged it by, like, we're going to give everyone snaps, and we'll bring Sluka along, and we'll hope that he wins the job or whatever. And I think he did by the end of camp. But now that we're at this point where it looks like he is going to be the starter, don't you kind of wish they had just given him all the snaps in training camp?
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate. UNLV hasn't had the same quarterback start every game since whenever.
Forever.
Right? Forever.
Yeah, maybe John Denton in like the 90s, maybe? I'd have to go back and look it up.
A while.
It's been a long time.
It's been a while.
You definitely have to Google their last quarterback to start every game.
Correct. So developing two people, knowing that the second person might have to come in and save you like Jaden Maeva did last year, might not be the end of the world, because you don't want to bring somebody in there who is, oblivious to what's going on and unable to function, to where you're going to have to slim the playbook down.
Yeah, that's what Odom basically said. He said, he pointed to last year, and he said, last year we knew who the quarterback was. It was Doug Brumfield. We were set. There was no question, and that lasted for 2 weeks. And then he got hurt, and then we had to go to the next guy. So whoever ends up being the starter against Houston on Saturday, who knows how long that's going to last, whether it be by performance, whether it be injury, what have you. But yeah, I guess the upside is now they do have, if something happens and Haj Malik Williams does have to come in and start a game or multiple games, you're pretty confident that he can run the offense and that they'll still be productive and, still be that they'll still be able to run the go-go offense and be pretty fearsome on that side of the ball. So yeah, Sluka's probably the upside guy. And to your point, they've got multiple guys who will be competent. So I think the downside is pretty limited by the approach that they took in training camp.
Yeah, so this season can wind up a variety of ways. It could be they hit the playoff. It could be they're Mountain West champions but missed the playoff. Could be they have a winning record and go to a bowl game. Could be they do enough to where there's not a new coach, or to where we need a new coach next year.
Yeah.
A lot could happen. Usually a UNLV football season is they're hoping to go from 2 wins to 4 wins and continue the rebuild of insert your favorite coach.
Yeah.
And on record, right now, 11 minutes, 40 seconds into our podcast, how do you, Mike, who got the award for attending the most practices for the media, project this season ending? You know more about this team than anybody.
I think I'll go as far as to say that I think they're in the Mountain West title game. I think they're one of the 2 best teams in the conference for sure. And I think their bowl hopes, their playoff hopes probably hinge on, do they beat Kansas at Kansas and go 4-0 in non-conference play? And do they beat Boise State in the regular season?
What about Fresno? That's a big game because Fresno.
That is a big game.
Sorry to cut you off, but according to the odds, UNLV and Fresno are each 6-1 to win the league. Boise's the favorite. The sportsbook obviously know more than you and me.
That game's at UNLV. I know they don't have the greatest home field advantage, but I got to believe UNLV will be favored going into that game. I think that's one they can take care of. And if UNLV is taking the next step to being a good college football program, that's a game that you should win. You should expect them to win. You should expect them to beat some good teams. Fresno's a good team, but you're going to have to beat some good teams along the way. So I do think they'll be in the Mountain West title game. If they get a couple breaks, if they win the big games or split those 2 big games, Boise and Kansas, who could both be ranked at the time they play, then I think you're a pretty good chance that you're going to that group of 5 playoff spot, assuming you then win the Mountain West title game. And if it's Boise again, it'll be tough to beat them twice. Not many people will pick them to do that, but I'm as high as anyone on UNLV this year. I think they're, real threat for 10 wins in the regular season. I've got them penciled into the championship, and I think they're very live for that group of 5 playoff spot.
Which is a big leap of faith considering we don't know who's playing quarterback.
We don't, but I'm also a big believer in Matthew Sluka, who I think if he hits, he's got Mountain West Player of the Year potential. Like, that's a guy who, if everything goes right, could just put up one of those years that, like, Jim or Fredette in basketball, he'd throw that to the football side. He could run for 20 touchdowns this year if everything clicks. So that's how high I am on that. Now, is it all going to work out that way? Maybe, maybe not. But when is UNLV ever going to have like a quarterback with that kind of potential and an All-American wide receiver and another All-American candidate in the slot and 3 All-Mountain West offensive linemen? Like, they are loaded on offense. I don't know if people really grasp that, like how... Like I said at the beginning, like, this is not a rebuild anymore. This is the finished product. This is probably as good as you can hope to get it. Like, they are loaded on that side of the ball.
And they've got 5 running backs, and they were like 4th nationally in running last year.
Yeah, like Jet Thomas any other year would be a guy that we're super excited about. Set the freshman record for touchdowns. Just a fast, explosive back. Like, we would be doing backflips about Jaden Thomas's potential, and yet he's kind of an afterthought in this offense. That's how loaded they are. So...
Yeah, I don't love the spot on Saturday at Houston. Of course, on the road. Houston is in a bigger league, theoretically, even though UNLV has a historically good roster, may have a better roster, right? And just talent-wise, just because you've got a bigger pool in Texas to recruit from. Don't know how the weather's going to be there. Obviously, you're going dry heat versus humidity. Kickoff is what, 4 Vegas time?
4 o'clock Vegas time.
6 o'clock Houston time. Kind of at the tail end of that. And then just in any level of football, week 1, you get teams are amped up. Passes are going too high. Maybe some late penalties. Maybe some false starts.
UNLV probably most likely running a true freshman place kicker out there. If any game that's close, you want a kicker on your side. Yeah. It's a hidden weapon that UNLV had last year. One of the first or second best kicker in the country, replacing him with a true freshman. So that's another factor.
And then the defense, they tell us, is massively upgraded from what we saw last year in the last 3 games, where San Jose State, Boise State, and oh my God, Kansas. And I think that quarterback from Kansas is going to make the NFL roster, Jason Bean.
Based on that the tape against UNLV?
Yeah.
I don't know if the defense is as loaded, like in terms of like playmaking talent as the offense, but I do think that they have more depth. The thing that I thought was their biggest issue last year was depth. Like they had players, but you saw by the end of the season, like Jackson Woodard was not moving as quickly and as spryly as he was earlier in the year because they just had to play so many snaps. And I think if you can maybe get those guys a little bit of a breather and you've got more depth and you can rotate guys once in a while, maybe you keep them fresher later in the year. That's what I'm probably going to be keeping an eye on. How many last year there were definitely guys they didn't want to put on the field on defense, but you've got to play them or you've got to run your starters into the ground. I think this year they'll have more options. So that's the good thing. It may not be standout talent on that side, but I do think they've got more options.
Yeah, and that's a great point is towards the end of the year, when you go through your 1 and 2s pretty quickly in college football, and when those injuries start coming in and you start putting folks up into the 2 deep where they're going to have to play, that's when you're exposed to weakness. And it's very, very, like I said, interesting. This is a fun time. I just, whenever we tape this podcast, if it's next week or whenever, I just hope that the season's not essentially. I hope that nobody takes a big old garden hose, Michael, and sprays the season.
You think if they lose at Houston, you think that's enough to turn people off from this team just because the expectation, just because people are hopeful of that playoff spot? But do you think they can get it back if they lose at Houston? Not the playoff, but you think they can get fans back and get them excited about the season?
Yes. I mean, there's a ton of momentum right now from the way last year went and the fact that this is a historically good team. And there's a ton of momentum because they are playing at Allegiant Stadium, right? I think the one thing that we failed to mention through all this is, yes, this is a historically good team, and yes, Odom has been building to this, and this, it's like an all-in type of thing, right? But this should not be the exception. This should be the norm, because this era of UNLV football is recruiting to this great city, this great athletic complex on campus, and this great stadium. So this is no longer Lead Athletic Complex, Sam Boyd Stadium to win UNLV. This isn't what Bobby struggled through and what Tony struggled through and no resources. This is the best funded team in the Mountain West with the best coach in the Mountain West right now. And he has, no matter when he leaves UNLV, he has given a blueprint for the next dude on how to win games, right? You get some solid 3 stars from the high school ranks. You develop them, and then you go transfer shopping. Guy from Texas.
Power 5 transfers.
Guy from Arkansas. Guy from Texas. Guys who were highly sought of, who couldn't get on the field at these other places, who still got it, that you don't have to worry about the NIL, and they know they got 1 or 2 seasons in Vegas to get drafted into the league and see what happens.
Yeah, I do think that is a blueprint for whoever ends up coaching this team going forward, whether it's Odom for another year or Marion stepping in after this year or whoever it ends up being. Um, it's I don't it's probably I don't think it's going to be as seamless as you're kind of making it out to be, just because Odom kind of hit a home run with that offensive coordinator hire, which kind of fell into his lap because their first hire was Bobby Petrino, and then he left after a couple weeks, and then they latched on to Marion, who turned out to be, kind of set the world on fire with that offense. So whoever it is after this, if there is an after this, probably going to take some time to get back up to speed. But to your point, I do think they have laid a foundation with the complex, with the funding. There is a path here for UNLV to maintain this going forward. Probably easier to do if they have a great season this year. Like if they go 6-6 and make it to some bowl game that no one watches this season, that momentum is probably.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm saying hypothetically. Like if that happens,
I have them going 6-6, but they've never been to back-to-back bowl games. I don't know how that would kill any momentum. I mean,
see, this team
let's not get too greedy here.
No. If they were to go 6-6 and play in the
Albuquerque
whatever,
Bowl.
yeah, and some game that's rated 0.3 on ESPN3, and then Odom stays and everything's intact, then I think you're fine. Like you take another shot, you trust him to keep churning the roster and find the next guy. That's great. If they go, 7-5, make that same bowl game, and someone hires Odom away, and you've got a new coach coming in against a team that kind of didn't live up to expectations, is that really momentum that you can keep going, or is this seen more as like a 2-year blip that was because of Barry Odom? I think that there's enough there that, if you make a good hire, you can keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also, as I said, I'm on board. I think they're going to blow the doors off most teams they play this year. I think they're going to win 10 games. So not an issue to me.
Yeah, I mean, let's not worry about losing Odom until the end is near.
Until they beat Kansas and they're 3-0.
If they beat Kansas, as you know, there's a lot of Jayhawks that work here. I would be so thrilled.
The Sun has that Kansas to Las Vegas pipeline locked down.
Got that pipeline going. Yeah, so it's going to be a fun season either way.
What's your prediction for the quarterback and for the season? You think they're going to go with the upside play, or you think it's going to be the Hajj Malik because he's been here?
No, I mean I think they go with Sluka, and I still don't have them winning on Saturday. I can't see them beating Houston, but I've been wrong at everything my entire life when it comes to sports. As you know, I'm a Pittsburgh Pirate fan, and we really haven't done anything. So maybe me thinking that Houston's going to win is a great thing, So
the one thing that I wouldn't want to see is a split at quarterback. Because I feel like that never works, and that is just broadcasting to everyone that you don't have a good quarterback. Is if they go out there and they're like alternating snaps or alternating quarters or something like that. If they're playing even snaps, that's probably a bad sign. That's the one thing that you probably don't want to see as a fan.
A split at quarterback to me reminds me of Marcus Arroyo, whose name I still can't say, but who
didn't really understand the quarterback position. Didn't know what he was looking at. Didn't know which guy was better. Just not a good handler of quarterbacks, which is ironic because that was his position when he was a player. But he really could not ever really tell what he was looking at that position. But yeah, if they go in and it's like Sluka for one possession, then Hajj Malik, then Sluka, then Hajj Malik, and they're just going back and forth and they can't really pin it down, that's probably a bad sign. Mm-hmm. That's something that would dissuade me coming out of week one, even more so than a loss, I think. Than a well-played loss. Yeah,
the game's UNLV is about a 2-point underdog. It could go either way. Case Kiefer, whose opinion I respect, I don't know if you respect his opinion, but our colleague here at the Sun seems to think the Rebels are better than I think, which is nice. It's good to have that opinion. But Mike will be on the ground in Houston. Follow his great coverage. Online and in the paper, we got a lot of cool features planned for print. Michael, to a 10-win season. May you be right for the first time. For Mike, I'm Ray, and thank you for listening to a Las Vegas Sun podcast.